From Boca Raton, Florida, Rabbis Efrem Goldberg, Philip Moskowitz, and Josh Broide are taking you behind the Bima. The BRS rabbis schmooze about contemporary issues and talk to special guests who give a behind-the-scenes look at how they got to where they are and what keeps them going. Welcome to Behind the Bima.
9 p.m. Wednesday night, we are coming to you live from Boca Raton. My name is Rabbi Efrem Goldberg. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Rabbi Joshua Broide, and we are here to take you
behind the Bima.
We're here to take you behind the Bima. It's good to be together as we are together, you and I, Rabbi Broide. Of course, we continue to desperately miss our dear friend Rabbi Moskowitz, and all of us, Jews around the world, and the Jews of Boca Raton, very much have the Moskowitzes on our mind. Chaya Esther Tehila Bas Ariyat Tzipora. And we daven, we ask Hashem to shower them with love and support and with comfort and with strength and with everything that they need. They're very, very much in our hearts and on our minds. Rabbi Broide, you said
Yes.
you said behind the Bima, and somebody knocked you off in the way that you say behind the Bima. They copied you in the behind the Bima very recently.
True, right? We're getting
national and international way. We haven't had a chance to share this yet on behind the Bima, but Jeremy Schaap, a ESPN reporter, longtime ESPN reporter, had a segment on ESPN's daily podcast, and it was on SportsCenter on ESPN about our good friends Myers Leonard, who we're in touch with regularly. We love Myers. And in it, they quoted, in fact, on SportsCenter, there were certain people who've never listened to one share I've ever given, have no feedback, have never heard of anything. And I got like a follow text for like, I'm pretty sure I just saw you on SportsCenter. Now, I always dreamt that when I would appear on SportsCenter and people would text me, I just saw you on SportsCenter, that I'd be playing center field for the New York Yankees,
right.
Or maybe they saw me hanging from the rim after an amazing dunk or something like that. But I'll take getting on SportsCenter however we can. And when Jeremy Schaap, the great ESPN reporter, on the longer podcast version of the story, he actually paused when he referenced Myers Leonard's appearance on our show. And he said, there's a great name to this podcast. It's called...
He loved the name, Behind the Bima.
Yeah. I wonder if he got that from hearing you, because maybe he thinks that's like part of the name is to say it
Part
that
of
way.
the shtick, yeah.
Yeah, but he actually said this podcast has a great name. It's called Behind the Bima.
Yeah.
And so I did get a flurry of people who also told me not only did he reference the podcast, but he said it like Broide says it, which was pretty interesting.
We had a good time. It's amazing
Yeah.
that the show is getting such wide reach right now.
Our friend Myers has worked out for 3 teams. The Lakers is the public one, 2 other teams as well. And please God, he'll be picked up by one of those teams. And whether he's recovered from his injuries and his skills are there, I think they are, but we'll leave it to the professionals to decide. But that incident that unfortunately he became famous for and that he appeared on our show about, and that was the beginning of our friendship, should not be an obstacle because, it's crazy to me. It's crazy to me. He said one word. Mistake. He didn't know what it meant. There's no pattern. There's no history. Nobody dug up anything they put together to show that this is who he was. One word they found. And he more than apologized and educated himself and made up for it. And there are other people. In fact, just last night, just to tell you that we're live, just last night, do you even know who previously had the scoring record in the NBA?
Kareem
Abdul-Jabbar, previously, otherwise known beforehand as... Do you know what his name was?
Dr. J.
No, that is a separate, different person. But Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was known as Lou Alcindor.
That's right.
And he had the scoring record in the NBA. And
come on, you're not impressed with me that I got the number one score?
Yeah, somebody told you. And he was surpassed last night by LeBron James. Now, while the world is excited, I have nothing against LeBron. I'm a Jordan is the GOAT. I'm not a LeBron guy. But more than that, the reason I raise it is because in 2018, LeBron on Instagram, he has more followers on Instagram than 203 countries have populations, 46 million people. So you have a certain responsibility when you have a platform like that, right? He has more followers on Instagram than the people in 203 countries. And he retweeted a lyric about the Jewish people. The lyric was by a performer named 21 Savage. We've been getting that Jewish money. Everything is kosher. An anti-Semitic trope, Jewish money. We're getting that Jewish money. And LeBron retweeted that lyric. And didn't go on an apology tour, didn't meet with Efrem Goldberg, didn't do a basketball clinic at Boca Raton Synagogue, didn't learn from Holocaust survivors. He wrote some bogus apology online, which was terrible. It's hard to even call it an apology. It wasn't really an apology. So breaking the scoring record, his longevity, his skills, it's undeniable. He's an incredible athlete, incredible basketball player. But you contrast some of the things that Kyrie has done, including now, by the way, taking down his delete. I don't know if you saw that story. And you compare Myers, and Myers really got a unfair treatment and deal on that. But it did land us on SportsCenter.
I wonder if you asked, Myers right now, if he thinks he's in a better place than he was before. Does he feel better as a person having gone through this experience?
Oh, he does. And he wouldn't do it again. It wasn't that
Right.
he's grateful that it happened. It was painful, very painful. We've known him for 2 years now and sort of lived through some of that pain with him and the public pain, the attacks that he received and threats against his wife. But he learned about himself, and he learned about forgiveness, and he learned about the Jewish people, and he learned about responsible language. He'll say that he's a much, much, much better person after it and a much better person for it. Not the way you want to necessarily become a better person, but he feels he's a better person for it.
It's so interesting because this week's Parsha, we're all about learning about Matan Torah, hearing about how all the other Jews, accepted it, and all the non-Jews, they didn't accept the Torah. It just makes you think that, what can we do to influence our neighbors and just say, you know what, we're not that bad. We're good people trying to do our best. And don't
listen, there are a lot of questions around anti-Semitism. We've spoken about it on Behind the Bima. We've written about it and published about it. People oversimplify it. If everything's anti-Semitism, nothing's anti-Semitism. If nothing's anti-Semitism, we're in trouble and we're in danger. So what's anti-Semitism? Joe Rogan's got the most popular podcast in the world. I think there's 20 million people a day who listen to him, right? He has more people who listen to his podcast than there are Jews in the world. And yesterday he had on 2 people who have their own podcast, and they were talking about and making fun of this question, should Ilan Omar have to apologize for talking about it's all about the Benjamins? And Joe Rogan says, nothing wrong with that. Everybody knows Jews love money like Italians love pizza. There's nothing anti-Semitic about that. There was never a systematic attempt to exterminate Italians because of their love of pizza. There's never a genocide against Italians because of their love of pizza. To begin to put that in the same sentence or make a comparison between the two is so grossly irresponsible. So is Joe Rogan an anti-Semite? I don't think so. But I do think he needs to be educated. I do think he said something irresponsible. So these are really, really, I think, important questions as we're going forward. So who do we cancel? Who do we educate? What's anti-Semitism? What's the cause? And all this is to tell you that next Tuesday night, February 14th, we're going to have a great conversation about this topic, a dialogue around anti-Semitism with Ben Shapiro and Yair Rosenberg. Ben Shapiro, people know, as the political commentator, media host, Daily Wire. He also has a very large media empire. And Yair Rosenberg, a staff writer at The Atlantic. The two, according to the ADL, they are the 2 most targeted Jews online by anti-Semites. Wow. And Yair comes a little bit from the left and Ben from the right. And we're going to moderate a conversation between the two live in Boca Raton Synagogue and also streamed online at brsonline.org/anti-Semitism to try to address some of these questions and to hear their perspective from very different angles on this topic that's, I think, very much in our minds. And we're seeing almost every day there's something that comes up. And Joe Rogan is just the latest of it.
So what can you and can't you say about another faith or another race? Where do you draw the line? Like, I was at a meeting last week. It was a couple of non-Jewish leaders. And I joked that they said, we're just waiting for a couple of rabbis. I said, they're on Jewish time. Now, they said, oh, Rabbi, you could say that. We can't say that.
Right.
So, but even the way they said it then, it was like, okay, well, do you think we have a problem with time? Like, maybe there's an issue, but I don't think there's anything wrong with saying Jewish time. Is there? Is that?
No, I actually gave a drush recently about that. That's a terrible concept. If you look in the Urban Dictionary online under Jewish time, it says like perpetually late, socially late. And I think that's an embarrassment. Jews, HaChodesh is Elachem, punctuality, promptness, efficiency, productivity, the preciousness of every moment of time. Those are Jewish concepts. For us, killing time is an act of murder. And you're both the perpetrator and the victim at the same time. So we don't believe in Jewish time. I'll tell you, one of the things actually Corona introduced for me is I never started a shir on time, a lecture on time. I'd always be like, let's give it 1 more minute, 2 more minutes. People are still trickling in. Let's go. And once you went online and you felt like, you're supposed to start streaming at a certain time, I'm not sure the mentality why it's different, but now it's prompt, but it's prompt. Whatever time we said we're going to start, we start promptly at that time, because the Jewish notion of time should be punctuality. But I don't think it's anti-Semitic to say that Jewish time, Jews run
But I'm
late.
saying, have we swung too far now where the non-Jew is saying to me, "Oh, I can't say that." You could say that. I don't take offense to that. Is that an offensive statement?
We're definitely living in a time of cancel culture and hypersensitivity. Actually, that was my article last week because I sound incredibly self-promoting. But that was more this and that was more that. But this was
There'll be a link to it right now.
I promise you, everything is unscripted and unplanned on Behind the Bima. I promise. And live. We're live right now, Wednesday night. Hold up. Here.
9/11.
Wednesday night, 9/11.
Yeah.
There you go. It's like holding up a newspaper, like hostage situation.
Right.
So, I spoke about the fact that there's something called immunity debt, where there's a theory. Not everybody agrees. Everyone every family has had the flu or RSV virus or corona or terrible colds this winter. So there's a theory called immunity debt, which is after 2 years of corona, where we distanced and we wore masks and we weren't exposed to viruses, we hurt our immune system. So now that we're back out in the public and around one another, our immune system can't fight, and that's why people are getting so sick. They're getting colds and flus and RSV virus because immunity debt from having been apart. Yeah, you got it. You still got that cough, right? So I wrote an article basically about emotional immunity debt, that if we're trying to be overprotective from sensitive language and we're canceling all these words we can't use, Stanford University had a whole thing about this. So we're creating an emotional immunity debt where we're actually going to make our children and ourselves more fragile, more vulnerable, more easily hurt by words, because we're trying to protect so hard and create this immunity debt so badly. We're actually going to create, right? Like it's like the peanut allergy, right? For a long time, they thought, how do you protect people from getting a peanut allergy?
Stop eating peanuts.
You have peanut-free zones, peanut-free schools, and peanut-free airplanes and peanut-free public spaces. And then a big study came out of Israel that
Bamba,
the lowest peanut allergies in Israel, because all the children are exposed early to peanuts through Bamba, so they don't get allergic. So I said, I'm not advocating we expose our children to insensitive or harsh or inappropriate or hurtful language, but I'm just saying that effort to protect ourselves and to be immune from it is actually hurting our immunity, and it's going to come back to hurt us even more. Right. So I don't think it's our job to be sensitive and not hurt others, and it's our job to not be overly sensitive and to be too easily hurt by others. And I think those same things can be true simultaneously.
It's funny, at Friday Night Live every week we tell a joke, and I realize that the jokes, I've been telling a joke. Imagine one joke every week for the last 12 years. So I have 600 jokes. And you look at some of the jokes.
Are they corny dad jokes? Rabbi
yeah, of course
jokes?
they are. But some of them you could look at right now and say, is that offensive? Is that offensive to Jews? Is that offensive to someone else? And it's not meant to be like that. And I feel like sometimes it's based on who's the one saying it. I'm not a racist. I'm a lover. I'm the biggest lover out there.
Right.
So, but it's funny. It's like you're just pointing out a quirk of a certain person, and I don't understand.
Sure.
I don't know where we draw that line
keep changing. Yeah, the rules keep changing. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about it next week. I hope people will come in person and online. Tuesday night, please God, this event, Yair Rosenberg and Ben Shapiro. Last night we had an incredible event, 500-600 people at BRS for Rabbi Dr. Meir Soloveitchik, together with Tikva Fund. It was a great event. He's brilliant. He's hilarious. Yeah. It was fantastic. And tonight we got a great guest, Mort Klein. And I won't read his bio because we're going to talk to him a lot about his background that people don't know about his background. His father's Satmar connection, what professionally he was on track to do before he became the president of the ZOA, and so much more. We've known Mort a long time. He's been a good friend, a friend of our community. And some consider Mort and the ZOA to be a little extreme, or some consider it polarizing. And, everybody's different. You don't have to love or agree with everything, but he's got a passion. He's got his heart in the right place, and he cares, and he stands up for the Jewish people. And we're deeply grateful and indebted to him for that, and grateful that he's agreed to go behind the Bima with us. Without any further ado, the great Mort Klein. We have known Mort Klein, who is one of the top leaders, Forward magazine, Forward newspaper, called one of the top Jewish leaders in the United States, head of the ZOA. We've known you for many years, Mort. You're a good friend, and thank you for going behind the Bima, and thank you for joining us.
It's an honor to be with you. You run one of the most important synagogues in the country, bringing Yiddishkeit to Southern Florida. That is the holiest and most important thing a person can do.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. And appreciate that coming from you, given what I'm about to say. But I really want to start with is, Mort, I've known you for a long time, but I came to know several things about you that I didn't before this conversation, all of which add up to how small the likelihood is that you would be the head of the Zionist Organization of America. One, that your father was a Satmar Chassid, an Orthodox rabbi at Smicha, the Satmar Rebbe, and in Europe had a long beard and a black hat, was a Rosh Yeshiva in his 20s. But already your father disagreed with the Satmar. But that Satmar background, and it's not a background that goes back to a great-great-grandparent. Your father was a Satmar Chassid, and here you are, the head of the ZOA. And you add to that, and we know that you have Tourette's syndrome, and that impacts the way you speak. And I've always had enormous admiration for the fact that despite something that would maybe cause others to not be a spokesperson for Jewish people, you are so passionate for Israel that despite the challenges of navigating Tourette's, you nevertheless never hesitate to appear, to speak, and to stand up and to advocate. So you add up all these different parts of your background, aside from your own training, which we'll get to, as well as an epidemiologist, and your research on nutrition and heart disease. It was unlikely you were going to land as the head of the ZOA. So talk to us about each of those variables or influences and how they did not hold you back from where you are today and what you're doing today.
Well, my father, Olav Shalom, had Tourette syndrome. He was also really a great Talmudic scholar. I mean, if I would read him a sentence from the Chumash, he could give me the next 20 sentences without looking at it. He just knew it by heart. The Rashi, the same. He knew the Rashi backwards and forwards. He paskin shalos. He answered serious, complex questions all the time to people. He was a serious scholar, and he had Tourette. My brother, by the way, is a world-renowned scientist at Washington University, St. Louis Medical School. So he got the brains. I got the Tourette. So and my brother says it's fair. We each got one. What's unfair about that? So,
at what age does one, and educate me, I apologize for my ignorance, I'm embarrassed by it, but tell us a little bit about Tourette's and what it's been like to have it and overcome that. And I know that's not the focus of our conversation, but I think it is an opportunity for other people to be able to be inspired by the fact that it hasn't held you back at all.
Well, Tourette is a neurochemical disorder. I've had it since age 5. There's really no treatment for it except very severe drugs that really makes you sort of like a gork. So you're not really quite the same, even though you no longer have tics. So I've never taken any of the drugs. I just live with it. And my father also was well, not also, but he was a wonderful orator, and he spoke publicly despite his Tourette. And I never looked at it as a challenge. I just ignored it. To tell you the truth, I simply ignored it. Now, and when I started college and started dating people, I did have women with whom I had very nice relationships who broke up with me because they couldn't tolerate my Tourette. And I told them I don't blame them. I wouldn't like it much either, but I have no choice. So that it did affect me there. But in terms of public speaking, I never even thought about it. I do let people know I have Tourette, so if they hear me make sounds or have facial tics, they should know it is that neurochemical disorder. It's nothing else. And I tell you, when I first came into the ZOA Israel business, because I was the only significant head of a significant Jewish organization that publicly opposed Oslo and Arafat, predicting, unfortunately, that it would lead to disaster, that this will never work. I was attacked relentlessly by my colleagues. And some of them even would say, Morton Klein is mentally ill. Look at all those tics. He's a nutcase. I mean, it was outrageous.
Wow.
And when people heard that and told me that, I would tell people, look, I may be mentally ill, but the Tourette is not the proof of it. That's separate. That's separate.
So 5 years old is a young age to stand out or be different. And was it hard to navigate growing up, going through class?
People did make fun of me.
On you?
I went to yeshivas. My Satmar Hasidic father made me go to yeshivas. And kids did make fun of me and mimic me. And it's funny, I can't even explain it. I just ignored it. That's all. Because I said to myself, what can I do? It's me. I would not like it to be this way, but it is, and I have to live. And I ignored it. So it's not like I never found it a challenge or this is horrible. Why did God do this to me? And
it's never slowed you down. Even now, does it get you nervous before you get up? A big speech you just spoke recently here in Florida before 1,000 people. Does it give you pause that you're concerned about?
No.
Are there things that exacerbate it or make it better or worse? Have you learned how to navigate?
I've been president of ZOA for 29 years, believe it or not. I'm a nervous wreck before every speech, before every TV program, radio program, before this blog, that I'm on with you, Rabbi, both rabbis. I am always nervous. I can never get over it, but that's not because of the Tourette. It's just because I'm nervous about making a fool of myself. So that's what this. But the Tourette has never stopped me. It's never been a factor of being nervous and not wanting to speak. I never turn down a speaking engagement because I always want a podium to promote the truth of the Arab-Islamic war against Israel and the truth, frankly, of American Jewish leadership, which is an issue, I'm afraid.
I'm just wondering, do you think that you said it never held you back, but do you think it actually made you stronger, that it kind of pushed you into a position of leadership?
It's very interesting you say that. 2 months ago, ZOA honored former President Donald Trump at our national gala because not a single organization, Jewish organization, said thank you for moving the embassy, recognizing the Golan, ending all aid to the Palestinians until they stopped paying people to murder Jews. He did incredible, the Abraham Accords, on and on. There's over 20 things. So I said I wanted to honor him. And I spoke before him. And I told everyone I have Tourette. And I got a tremendous response to my talk. It was very nice, very, very kind of the audience. And Donald Trump got up and said nice things about my speech. He says, you know what, Mort? I think your Tourette is what makes you a better speaker. This makes you want to fight harder to do a better job. So he actually said that to me. He thought my Tourette was actually a positive. I don't agree. I'd like to go away within 5 minutes from now. That would be my pleasure.
Let's go back to your background and your father, the Satmar Chassid. When did your father pass away? Did he know of your work in the ZOA? Was he proud of it? He himself, I know he himself disagreed with his own Satmar background. How did he come to that conclusion? Was it his experience as a survivor? Did he disagree if there were in Israel? That in itself is a fascinating history.
All I know is that my father, Olav Shalom, told me that he did, in his interpretation of the Torah, and he was a serious scholar, he said there was nothing there that precluded the Jews reestablishing the Jewish state. He just didn't think there was anything in the Torah that required you to not recreate a Jewish state. It was only that. I don't know if his being a survivor of Auschwitz, when my father lost his first family, he lost 8 brothers and sisters. He was the only one living in this entire family. He was alone. Wow. And he had a rough time in his life. He was depressed about all of that. He always said, why did I survive and not my brothers and sisters, he would say frequently, who are better than me, he would say. They should have survived. So that it was a major consequence in his life after surviving Auschwitz. So I don't know if that was a factor in him wanting a state, because a state could have saved millions of Jews. He never said that to me. He only said to me the Torah permits reestablishing a state. He disagreed with Rabbi Teitelbaum, who he got a smicha from. He even went to Brooklyn and argued with him about it.
Really?
And he said the only thing they finally agreed with during their arguments about Eretz Yisrael, the only thing they agreed with is he should leave Philadelphia and move to Williamsburg. That's the only thing and he agreed with that. But he just wasn't resourceful to be able to get that done.
You yourself were born in a displaced persons camp, a DP camp in Germany, and you only moved at the age of 4. I don't even know if you have memories from being born in those 4 years in Germany. Do you think being a second generation survivor has influenced and impacted your leadership on behalf of Israel too? With the stories, did you grow up hearing those stories, and did that help shape you?
My parents almost never talked about the Holocaust. Both of my parents are survivors. But my mother from Poland, my father from Czechoslovakia. Maybe once or twice in all the years did they ever say something about the Holocaust. They didn't want to talk about it. So I never consciously, look, I didn't go into this business. I went into math and statistics and epidemiology. I worked with the greatest chemist who ever lived for 20 years, Linus Pauling, a 2-time Nobel Prize winner. It's only in the late 80s, not my late 80s, I'm not there yet. In the late 80s, my wife, Rita, my lovely wife, who helped me set this up, I have trouble with this, even though I have a math background, you think I could figure all this out. My wife started complaining that the media is so unfair to Israel, attacking Israel all the time, lying about Israel, exaggerating lies about Israel. She said, Mort, it's not enough that you make a living and you figure out what movie we should go to this weekend. you have to use your talents that God gave you to fight for the Jews. And I said, look, Rita, I don't know anything. I mean, I love Israel. It should be well, but I can't argue anything about Israel. I don't know the issues. She said, so learn. So it was my mother, my wife, who kept pressuring me to do something. I was afraid of losing her respect, was a motivating factor for me, that I started reading everything I could about Israel so I'd be able to converse about the issues, because I could not. And that's how I went into it. It's interesting. Linus Pauling, I asked him, why did you go and work on international peace? And he ended up with a Nobel Peace Prize. I said, you're a chemist. Why did you care? He says, I didn't care. My wife kept screaming at me that if the world is destroyed by world war or nuclear war, your chemistry will mean nothing. And she kept badgering me. And he said to me, I was afraid I would lose her respect for me. And that's why I went and did peace work. I did it to maintain my wife's respect. So in a more minor way, I got into this to maintain my wife's respect. And so I learned everything. And then my daughter came home one day from high school, and I read her history textbook. Every paragraph about Israel, there were several pages in Israel. Every paragraph had a lie, at least one lie about Israel. Now that I was knowledgeable, and I was horrified. And to make a long story extremely short, I went to the next board meeting of the school board, made an issue out of this. And it's quite interesting. The Jewish people on the board wanted nothing to do with this. They actually called me at home and say, stay away from this. You're only going to make it more troublesome for Jews that you're making trouble. The Jews. The non-Jews said, I want the book changed because I don't want my kids learning falsehoods. Not that they cared about Israel. They just want accurate history. So I wrote a bunch of articles about it, went to the superintendent of the schools, wrote to the DC Heath, the publisher. Make a long story short, they asked me to rewrite the textbook. I wrote a 9-page single-spaced explaining every lie and what is true. And they redid the textbook. This made national Jewish news that I changed this textbook. Then I changed Bedeker's travel guides. It's a long story. I won't get into any of this. Bedeker's is the oldest travel book company in the world out of Stuttgart, Germany. They had over 100 lies about Israel in their travel guide. I wrote articles about it in the Jerusalem Post and elsewhere. Simon & Schuster, that distributed the guide, got in touch with me. They asked me to come to Germany to meet with the board. I flew to Germany at their expense, met with them. They hired me to rewrite the travel guide, and it was done, a new travel guide. And I did many such things, churches, universities, and because of my wife, and because I became incensed at the lies about against my people and my Jewish homeland, and I just couldn't tolerate it. And that's when people from ZOA came to me and asked me to run for president. I had no interest in being president. I don't know how to be president. So they asked me to be president, and I said to run for president. There was an incumbent. They said, you can't win because they don't really know you. They know the incumbent. He's friends with everybody. You'll lose.
Wow.
And so I said to him, look, if you promise me I'll lose, because I don't want to be president. I don't know how to be president. But if you promise me I'll lose, and you think this will help make him more of an activist, if you promise me I'll lose, I'll run. No politician would ever say that. But I ran as if I cared about winning. And I won by 17 votes out of many hundreds cast. And I became president. And the organization was completely broke. We had no money.
What year was this?
This was December 93.
Right around Oslo.
I did. The reason I agreed to, even though I thought I wouldn't become president, the reason I agreed to run was Oslo. I was so horrified by Oslo. I thought if I win, I'll have a podium to speak against it, because I thought this was one of the greatest mistakes any government has ever made on behalf of its people, having negotiation and deals, elevating one of the great terrorists of the world, Yasser Arafat, and giving land away to a terrorist entity. And I wanted to speak about it. And that is, without Oslo, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have run.
At the time, president was a lay position or a professional position?
A lay.
Was it a full-time job or was it a lay?
For 6 years, I worked without salary, full-time. I didn't think I'd work full-time, but we had no money. I had to spend most of my time begging people for money. And I didn't know it. I knew one wealthy friend, Irving Moskowitz. You may know the name.
Sure.
One of the great Jews who brought up so much land in Jerusalem to save it for the Jewish people. I knew one wealthy man, and I called Irving, and I said, Irving, I have no money. We're going to declare bankruptcy. It's over. He said, well, how much do you need? I said, to survive 6 months, I need $250,000. to survive. I said, I'll have to fire almost everybody. I can survive. He said, my goodness, Mort, you really need that much? Yes, that's what I need. We have $3,000 in the bank. So he said, Mort, if I give you 200,000, can you raise the other 50? I said, no, I don't know anybody. Nobody will give me your money. You're it. He said, oh, yeah. And he said, well, all right, maybe. I said, well, before you offer it to me, Irving, I said, you have to know, in 6 months, if I don't continue raising more money, we're going to go bankrupt. The 250 you're giving me, if you decide to give it to me, may be thrown down the drain. You may lose all of it. He said, Mort, this is not the way a fundraiser speaks. You don't like a fundraiser, this may be thrown out. I said, but Irving, I have to live with myself. I cannot take your money unless you recognize you may lose all of it. Because I don't know. I'm not a fundraiser. I'm a biostatistician. I don't know anything about fundraising. And that's how I started ZOA. And I was successful in raising money somehow. And if it wasn't for Irving Moskowitz, we would have closed the doors right away. He saved ZOA. Irving and Cherna Moskowitz saved ZOA. And they're donors to this day to ZOA.
A great man. And to give people some perspective, so at the time, and you alluded to it, you're a lecturer at Temple University, a biostatistician at UCLA School of Public Health. You're working at the Institute of Science and Medicine. You published on epidemiology in academic journals. In fact, I understand that your research on nutrition and heart disease was cited as one of the top 50 scientific studies of 1992. So you abandoned a career the very year before you left to go to the ZOA. You have one of the most cited studies of the year prior on nutrition and heart disease. Is it true, by the way, that a glass of wine every day is good for the heart?
The best of my understanding, it is true.
Okay, good.
But even more important is vitamin C. 500 milligrams of vitamin C reduces heart episodes by 40%. That was my big study.
Interesting. And it has not been disproven since then.
I don't think so. No. In fact, that study was cited in all the major TV programs, which was so astonishing. And it's true. So
you had a career, right? The year before, you have one of the most cited studies, and you have a whole career.
I gave up a salary. 6 years I worked without pay. My dear wife, who was a teacher, not exactly a wealthy, a big salary, she said, "This is important work. We have money in the bank. We can survive for a while. Do it."
She didn't say, "You got my respect, but just keep the job."
Yeah, got my respect. Now go back to work.
Yeah, go back to work.
And after 6 years, we were running out of money. I went to one of my donors, who was a very major philanthropist. You would know his name. I'm not going to mention it. And I said, I'm going to be leaving. And he said, you don't get paid? No, that's ridiculous. He said, change the bylaws. I will pay your salary. He increased his gift. He's been paying my salary for 23 years, most of my salary. Anyhow, so if it wasn't for this one guy, I wouldn't be here anymore.
So you're the president of the ZOA, and you come onto the scene with Oslo. Obviously, you had that impact with textbooks, and I think it's really important for everybody watching and listening. Before you became, Mort Klein, the public face of the ZOA, who's interviewed in prominent places, you were just Mort Klein, the private citizen who was bothered by textbooks and travel guides. Right. And everyone, people bemoan Israel and anti-Israel sentiment, anti-Semitism. They sit around their Shabbos tables and they WhatsApp and text one another, but they don't do anything about it. You don't have to be the head of the ZOA or the Rabbi of Boca Raton Synagogue to do something, right? You could write a letter and you can protest and you can rewrite a textbook and you can demand of leadership to have more accurate portrayal, depiction of Israel. So Mort, what would you say to the person listening or watching about how every person, whether you're shy, introvert, extrovert, you have Tourette's or you don't, everybody could get involved in doing more to stand up for Israel?
Well, AIPAC's newsletter called New Year's Report actually did a full-page article about all the work I did with textbooks, travel guides, universities, and such, and titled it "One Man Can Make a Difference." Wow! Because I did it as a private person. I mean, it does take work, but anybody can do it. And I urge everyone, when they see things in the newspapers or the media that are false about Israel, they should always write a letter. Even if the letter isn't published, that may cause them to publish someone else's letter. If they see people care about this, it has an impact. And they should write to members of Congress. They check all the mail they get every day, emails every day, and it makes an impact. I'm constantly told by members of Congress, we lobby all the time, that they hear from anti-Israel people, radical Muslims. They don't hear from Jews. Don't hear from Jews. Even And even this latest vote we just had this week, it's because Jews have not made a public issue out of Ilhan Omar and the other radical Jew haters and Israel bashers. Ilhan Omar was finally thrown off of the House Foreign Relations Committee. She's one of the worst haters of Israel and Jews in Congress. And every single, 211 people voted to support her. 218 voted against her. And I have to say, just the fact, it's not a political statement, every single Democrat voted to support her. Every single Democrat. And the 27 Jews, Democrat Jews, every one of them voted to support her. Every one. From Jerry Nadler to Guggenheim to, isn't Moskowitz your new congressman down there?
Yep.
He voted. If he knew that the Jews of South Florida would go crazy if he voted to support her, he wouldn't have done it. But he knew no one's going to say anything.
Right.
We're going to say something. But Mort, what would you say to somebody who says, the ZOA today is essentially a Republican right-wing organization in Israel. It's not bipartisan. It's really very narrow. It only speaks to a very narrow audience. The most right-wing or the most extreme or the most Republican, the ZOA is just a mouthpiece or a partner organization for them. What would your answer be to that?
Absolute rubbish. My devotion is to the Jewish people in Israel. Because Republicans happen to be better in Israel, I'm more inclined toward Republicans, not because they're Republicans, because they're better in Israel. And when people, even in my speech that I gave many speeches last week in Florida, and one of them, a woman came up to me, I'm surrounded by 100 people, and she says, "You made so many extreme statements, Mr. Klein. I'm so upset with you. Such an extreme speech. You've made so many hostile statements about Arabs." So I said, my goodness, I don't want to give an extreme speech. If I said anything extreme, I never want to do that again. Tell me, ma'am, name one thing I said that's extreme. Just one thing, and I'll never say it again. Oh, you said so many things that are extreme. I understand you think that, but I'm just asking for one. Let's start with one. I'll never say it again. Oh, well, she's thumping. There's 100 people around. Oh, I got it. You said that DeSantis is a great friend of Israel. I said, that's extreme. First of all, you told me you're upset about the Arab statements. You don't even mention, you bring up DeSantis, who I know personally. I lobbied with him. I testified 3 times before his committees. I went to Israel with him, his first trip as governor. I know him personally. He's a great friend of Israel. And if you disagree, that doesn't make me extreme. We disagree. And then I said, and then people start yelling at her. So name one thing. Tell Mr. Klein one thing. She just turns around and walks away. And I would ask you, rabbis, what allows you to say we're narrow, we're right-wing, we're pro-Republican? Tell me what we do that would allow you to make such a statement, because it's completely untrue.
Well, I'm not making the statement that I believe that. We're not only fans of the ZOA, we're very honored to be recognized this year at the ZOA dinner in Florida. So obviously, we have no problem, and we're grateful supporters. I'm not making that statement myself. I'm really asking, what would you say to the person who does make that statement, who sees that the ZOA or that you might be, perceived as divisive or polarizing, and what would you say in terms of, is it better for Israel to be more broad and a place that a wider swath feel comfortable and rally around the things? Because, right, I mean, Mort, the things that you say are right on. They're dead on. Don't give money to people, to terrorist families who kill Jews, and don't support terrorists who have rejected Israel's attempts to peace countless times. Demand of them that, right, the things that you say are dead on, and yet somehow by some you're perceived as divisive or polarizing. So I'm asking, what would you say? Why would they feel that way, and why are they wrong?
Well, of course, I asked them, just I asked you, what have we done or said that allow you to say that? They never have an answer. They'll have an answer like the one I just told you, nonsense. And I would tell them, right. What have we done that's important? We've lobbied against Oslo, predicting it'll lead to more terrorism, and that Arafat is still a terrorist. That turned out to be totally true. We're the only Jewish group that lobbied against the Gaza withdrawal, where Sharon threw 10,000 Jews out of their homes in Gaza and northern Samaria. We predicted this will lead to Hamas and thousands of rockets. That's exactly what happened. But we had a vote in the Conference of Presidents, the umbrella group of all the Jewish groups. on the Gaza withdrawal. It's one of the few votes we've ever taken. The vote was 50-1. Every Jewish group voted supporting the Gaza withdrawal, right? ZOA is the only one who said this will lead to absolute disaster. They were all wrong. But since they're part of the much larger majority of people promoting a certain belief, even though it's wrong, they're considered mainstream and reasonable. We tell the whole truth, which is out of the mainstream, unfortunately. Look, we've honored many Democrats at our dinners. Unfortunately, fewer and fewer Democrats are worthy of being honored by ZOA. I'm happy to honor any Democrats. We've honored Brad Sherman and Elliot Engel and such, who are great friends of Israel, because all we care about is Israel. So it is simply false by telling the whole truth of the Arab-Islamic war against Israel. You notice I don't say Arab-Israeli conflict, because it is not. It's an Arab-Islamic war against Israel in the West. Israel has offered a state to the Palestinian Authority 4 times in the last 20 years, 4 times, including 97% of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, 3% of Israel proper to make up for the 3% they can't give away because there's 500,000 Jews there, half of Jerusalem, billions of dollars in aid, and they've said no without a counteroffer. And when I asked, by the way, and this is interesting, I asked Prime Minister Olmert, how could he turn down your insane offer? I said, I wrote articles blasting you. He says, I know, Mort, I read them. Said, how could you offer such a thing? He said, well, I wanted to finally get the peace. I said, why didn't he accept it? How on earth did Abbas not accept your offer where you gave him virtually everything he asked for? And you know what Olmert said to me? Abbas said to me, you have to get rid of 3 clauses. 1, we accept Israel as a Jewish state. We're not doing it. 2, that we're not allowed to bring as many so-called refugees into Israel as we want, which would end Israel as a Jewish state. And 3, you have to get rid of the clause that says no further claims. And Olmert said to him, what do you mean no further claims? We're giving you everything. That means it's over. No further claims. No, we're not signing it. What more proof do you need that the Palestinian Authority has zero interest in peace? They have zero interest in the state if it means making any concession to Israel. They have zero interest. As I said, they could have had a state 4 times in the last 20 years, 8 times in the last 80 years. They were offered a state in 1937 by the Peel Commission, where they offered the Arabs 95% of the rest of Palestine that was left, 5% for the Jews. The Arabs said no. And they were offered a 50-50 deal, Resolution 181 in 1947-48, and 6 Arab countries went to war to destroy Israel. They could have had a state since 1948. So, and why don't Jewish leaders, Israeli leaders, rabbis, not all rabbis, many rabbis, make this clear? We should be proud that Israel's done everything they could to make peace. It's the Arabs that refuse to accept it.
Yeah, we make this clear, and you know who agrees with you, Mort, is the Israeli people. This current government, evidence of that. But all the polls across Israel show that there is no more left wing of Israel. There is, that 2-state solution advocacy is shrinking in Israel itself, because the people themselves have become absolutely disillusioned by the notion of continuing to make offers when there's no one on the other side who's willing to accept them. I once had I call it a privilege, but under a previous administration, I went to the White House several times. A small group of Jewish leaders were invited to communicate on issues of Israel. And when I pressed the administration officials on that, and I said, why do you keep putting pressure on Israel? All they've done is make concessions. The other side hasn't made one. Let them make a concession and prove that they're an honest partner. And you know what the answer was? I remember I walked away so depressed.
What?
They said, the other side is so weak. If we put pressure, they'll crumble. Israel's strong, so you have to put pressure with a strong. So I said, they're so weak, you can't even put pressure, but Israel should make concessions with them?
No, there's a more powerful point. Why don't they accept almost everything they've asked for a state? That's even more powerful. Don't ask them for concessions. Accept what Israel's offered, which, of course, I oppose, because it'll be very dangerous for Israel. But that's not made clear. In fact, one of the most extraordinary things that isn't made clear, even Bibi just was interviewed on television, Israeli leaders, Jewish leaders, the Palestinian Authority pays Arabs lifetime pensions to murder Jews.
Right.
But by the way, the pension is 5 times the average salary of a Palestinian Arab. It's a very lucrative. And the more Jews you murder, the higher your pension. This guy who murdered 7 innocent believing Jews in the shul last week, his family, he was killed. His family will now get a lifetime pension for that. Why aren't Israeli leaders and Jewish leaders and every rabbi screaming, you're dealing with Arab Nazis. They pay people to kill us. It's just unbelievable. They've named hundreds of streets, schools, sports teams after Jew killers. They honor them. And they put posters. I think I have one here. Yes, I do. They make posters of Jew killers. This is a real poster. They put them in all the high schools and colleges in the Palestinian Authority, honoring killers who have murdered Jews. We're dealing with a vicious, vicious Nazi-like culture. And I don't hear Israeli leaders, Jewish leaders, or even most rabbis making an issue out of this. On campuses, when I talk about all this, nobody can believe me. They say, if this is true, why isn't Israel screaming about it? Why aren't my rabbi in my conservative synagogue screaming about it? We have all the truth on our side. We don't make the case.
What do you make of that? So why, I understand that some who become assimilated in their values, some who are afraid of being canceled, but Israeli leaders, why don't you hear Bibi Netanyahu talking about it? Why don't you hear the most right-wing government in Israel's recent history? Why isn't this the top of their agenda to be able to correct the record on all these things?
I know all these prime ministers. They're my friends. I deal with them, from Bibi and the rest of them. I've told all of them, you have to make this a major public issue. Talk about this every time you're on TV or radio. Make it clear what a monstrous regime you're dealing with. Mahmoud Abbas is one of the vicious Jew haters, killers in the world. And you know what every single prime minister said to me? I can't do that. Then they'll accuse me of trying to ruin the chances for peace. I find that response astonishing. Astonishing. And the proof's in the pudding. They don't say it. They don't say it. I mean, if Jews were paying Arab, if the Israeli government was paying Jews to murder Arabs, every Arab would be screaming about this day and night. Congress would be screaming. Jewish leaders would be screaming. I'd be screaming. It would be so horrible. And yet that's the case with the Arabs, and we ignore it. They spend $450 million a year paying Arabs to murder Jews. This is not a small thing. This is a major thing. And no one knows about it. It is so important that we expose the fact that Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority is a vicious terrorist dictatorship. To reduce sympathy for the Palestinian Arabs, it would be harder to support the Palestinian Arabs if they knew that they're paying people to murder Jews, that they're naming everything after Jew killers, that they have parades for terrorists, that after 7 Jews were killed, they were handing out candy in all the streets. They had fireworks in all the Arab cities praising these murders. It's astonishing. Right. And when Bibi spoke about this to Tapper, he just said, oh, they have fireworks after this. He didn't say, can you believe they did? Do you realize who we're dealing with?
They had fireworks we had fireworks after 9/11. The average American citizen was deeply offended by those fireworks after 9/11. So we have to make that comparison. 7 Jews murdered outside of a synagogue is yet another 9/11 for Israel. And every time they celebrate, it should be an offense to all of humanity.
But they don't make it clear. They don't make the case everywhere they go in the media. They're fireworks. They hand out candy. They're so thrilled. They're dancing in the street. This is a monstrous culture. And they say, well, if I say this, they'll tell me, they'll call me an Islamophobe. I don't care. I don't care if they say that. You're telling the truth. Let people know. But nobody, what I just told you, very few people, Jews, almost no Jewish college students or others know what I've just said. And yet it's been happening for decades. And I blame Jewish leaders, but they don't do it. AIPAC, ADL, AJ committee, none of them make an issue out of this. None of them.
Let me ask you more. You mentioned that ZOA recently honored President Trump, and there's no question any objective person who measures his impact and policy difference for Israel, it's extraordinary, the record of what he did. And you don't have to embrace his personality and character to be able to simultaneously say that the administration did wonderful things. They don't go together, although nuance and subtlety is lost today in the world. You're either all in or all against, and you're not allowed to bifurcate and say that I'm grateful for policies, even if I am repulsed by certain character or other things about somebody. But the equation changed a little bit when Trump had hosted for dinner Kanye West and Nick Fuentes, and you, I think to your great credit, spoke out about that. You spoke out about your concern about that. You were willing to be critical about that. And I think that is a level of credibility when people are willing to be critical of both sides, not only critical of the people they're against, but critical of their friends too. But, was the criticism strong enough? Would it have been more criticism if it was Biden or somebody else who hosted them? I'm curious, given that relationship, were you critical to him directly? Did he have an explanation or excuse? Do we not have to worry the same way that we can't tolerate awarding or rewarding or giving money to Jew killers? We can't tolerate giving an audience or hosting for dinner Jew haters, anti-Semites. So, do we have to be careful when we go all in celebrating someone as the best ever on something, and then it turns out that they're doing the very behavior which we should find repulsive?
Look, Donald Trump was the greatest friend to Israel in the White House we've ever had. He did extraordinary things. We at ZOA felt it was our moral obligation to say thank you, sir, for everything you've done, especially since no other Jewish group did that. That doesn't mean that I love his personality or his personality flaws are a problem, but that's separate than his policy. But a week after we honored him, he had dinner with these two Jew-hating monsters, and he refused to condemn them. A week later, I wrote an op-ed in the Jerusalem Post condemning Trump for this, demanding he condemn them. I even said to him, you don't even have to apologize for having him for dinner. You claim that you don't know Fuentes was a Jew hater, a Israel basher. All right, now you know. So condemn him. Don't apologize. Don't say I shouldn't have had him. It's okay with me personally. But it's not okay if you don't publicly condemn the statements that each of them have made as being disgusting. It took weeks for him to condemn Fuentes. He did condemn Fuentes, but he never condemned Kanye West. And it's really almost unforgivable. So do you worry, and I'm not saying that you did or ZOA did, but do you worry, just as an observation in general, because I think this was actually a challenge in the Orthodox Jewish community, some of who almost deified Donald Trump during his presidency because he was doing these remarkable things. Like, one thing history should teach us is not to go all in on anybody. That many political leaders are sometimes transactional, some are more sincere than others. But there's a rabbinic term, kabdeu v'chashdeu. Respect him and be cautious and suspicious of him. And maybe trust but verify.
Trust and verify. And maybe there's something to learn, that we shouldn't be too all in or too glorifying or too deifying or too, we have to be able to, even while we are grateful and admire policies, we have to have some boundaries and cautiousness, because people, we don't know what they're going to end up doing and who they're going to be. And as you said, it's unforgivable. And the same way we condemn those who compensate terrorists, we have to condemn and be intolerant of those who are willing to host or invite Jew haters too.
Well, it was a rare occasion where Trump, did something that was this harmful, that enabling anti-Semitism. So his record is overwhelmingly positive for us. Overwhelmingly. So even though he did this, I'm still grateful for his presidency. He was very wrong about this issue. One can speculate why he wouldn't condemn Kanye West. Some people speculate that he thinks Kanye West, by being friends with him, will help him get more of the black vote. That could be a factor. I don't know. But he did condemn Fuentes. It took him weeks, but he did. So
does his not condemning Kanye disqualify him in your mind?
No. No, it does not disqualify. He did as much for Israel as I would have done if I was president. I couldn't have done any more. So what he did was so extraordinary. And the people he gave us, David Friedman, Jared, Jason Greenblatt, incredible friends of the Jewish people, Mike Pompeo, Nikki Haley. I mean, this guy was unbelievable for us. So that overwhelms his refusing to condemn. Look, he didn't praise Kanye West for what he said. I think there may be a political reason that he did this. He's wrong. But what he did is so overwhelmingly positive that we should still be grateful to Donald Trump, despite some of his personality flaws. And he does have personality flaws.
Give us some good news on Israel. Anything good going on that you see a trend in the U.S.-Israel relationship, or with Israel? Or give us some good news the ZOA is seeing.
Well, at least by asking that question, we don't need that much time. No, the good news, first of all, the proof there is a God is that we Jews have made so many mistakes, have had so many problems, and yet we're still here. To me, that you don't need any more proof that there's a God than that fact that the Jewish people remain, that we're here and thriving. The good news is the Israeli people are sick and tired of trying to deal and appease and make huge concessions that don't even work with our enemies, like the Palestinian Arabs, that they finally have voted in a rational centrist. I don't call them right wing. Truth is not a political position. Truth is not a political position. If these guys, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and Bibi, are telling the truth about issues, that's not right wing. For example, and so I think it's a tremendously positive development that we have ardent, courageous Zionists now in the government. We never really had that before. And Bibi is going to be, I believe, be brought along with them. He's the weaker of the links in this government. He'll be brought along to do the right things. And what are the things they're proposing? Death penalty for convicted murderers of Jews. We have the death penalty. That's extreme. That they want any terrorist who's convicted and goes to prison, when he comes out of prison, deport him. Is that extreme? Remember, Israel's not America. We don't have terrorism constantly. Israel has 7 terrorist attacks every single day for the last year and maybe the last 75 years. They really are suffering terribly from being attacked by Arabs who surround them. So they need to be a little tougher. They want Jews to pray in the Temple Mount. Any Jew who believes it's appropriate to pray, if Muslims can pray on our holiest place, the Temple Mount, why can't a Jew who believes it's okay? It's outrageous that we can't pray there. This is extreme. This is just normal. And the grandparent clause, I assume you're familiar with the grandparent clause. In 1970, they changed the rules that anyone can automatically become a Jew, a Jewish citizen, if they have one grandparent who's Jewish. Well, you know what that's done? Over half the people who moved to Israel last year are not Jewish. Over half the people who moved to Israel are not Jewish. We have gone in 30 years from 84% of the people of Israel are Jewish. Now it's 73%. We're losing 1% every 3 years of the majority of Jews. There are 500,000 non-Russian Jews in Israel. 72% of the Russians who come to Israel are not Jewish. Only 13% of the Russians convert. They're not interested. So this is a real problem. If we don't do something about non-Jews coming to Israel, this will no longer be a Jewish state in a number of decades. So that's not extreme. That's rational and appropriate. If you want to talk about the Supreme Court, I'm happy to talk about that as well. But we now have strong Jews, committed, courageous to do what's right for the people. None of it is extreme. They're trying to get rid of extreme policies like the grandfather clause and the Supreme Court being choosing judges by their own courts, the Supreme Court deciding who the next judges will be. The policies now are extreme. They're trying to make them rational centrist. That's a positive development.
Mort, do you miss epidemiology? Do you miss science? Do you miss lecturing at university?
I miss people saying really nice things to me when I was a scientist. Because I only got the nicest compliments. And I miss the fact that in science, generally, not always, people look at the data and the data will control. In the Jewish world that I'm in now, I can tell people, when I came into this business, one of the reasons I did is I said to my wife, Rita, God bless me. I'm very persuasive. I know how to debate and how to make an argument. I said to my wife. So when I get into this business, I'm going to be able to convince people to agree with my positions on Israel. I was completely wrong. No matter what data I showed it to people on the left or even the center, it doesn't matter. In science, generally it matters. Not always, but generally. So I missed having rational debates and rational discussions with really smart people. In the Jewish world, I am really disappointed in the Jewish leadership. They're really weak and they refuse to look at the data. And one of the reasons they do is they think if they act too tough, I believe, too tough with Arabs or Muslims, it'll only make them angrier and they'll become even more violent toward us. They're afraid. This is frightened appeasement. It's not principle. It's frightened appeasement. So yes, I do miss being in science. I miss working with people like Linus Pauling. It was a great pleasure working with someone with unbounded intelligence, just so smart, so knowledgeable. I don't find that in the Jewish world.
Yeah, it's also that appeasement is foolish. If you look at Israel's history, the only prime ministers and the only governments that made peace with the Arabs were the right wing through strength. And again, if we're students of history and you look at it and analyze it, you'll see that it's only when you express strength that the other side actually makes peace. It's when they think they can exploit you and that you'll compromise in ways that hurt your own people that they're unyielding. So history should teach us anything. It's that.
Donald Kagan, the great professor of classics at Yale, wrote a book called On the Origins of Peace and the Prevention of War. That's what the book was called. He looked at 3,000 years of turmoil between peoples. He said throughout history, appeasement has always failed. He said it's never worked. He didn't talk about Israel, by the way. He said appeasement has always led to more terrorism, more war, more violence. Appeasement fails. It even fails with our own children. If we try to appease our children to do what they're screaming for, you only get more screaming later. It doesn't work.
Right.
If they see you're strict about an issue, they'll learn, don't even try to bring it up. It's not going to work. No, and yet the Jews have been trying to appease forever, to this minute. And as you said, it doesn't work. History has shown it. But I believe
Mort, you said you miss hearing nice things, so we'll end with something nice, and we're not just appeasing you, but we mean it. But I will say that, for those who agree, those who disagree with you, but I think overcoming what you don't consider an obstacle, but overcoming Tourette's to be a spokesperson of the Jewish people, to fight with passion for the Jewish people, unabashedly, unapologetically, is something that we all owe you a huge thank you, and we have tremendous admiration for, and are inspired by, that each of us, whatever we conclude, whatever we believe, however we think we can make that difference for Israel in whatever way, we have that obligation, we have that responsibility. If we don't like the way someone else is doing it, then we should get involved. If we do like the way they're doing it, then we should get behind them and help them do it. But none of us can afford to be passive or indifferent or silent on it. All of us should get involved, and you're a great example of that. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for all that you do for the Jewish people. Thank you what you do for fighting for Israel. Thank you for being our friend, and thank you for going behind the Bima with us.
Thank you for those kind words. I haven't heard anything like that in a while, and I will cherish it and relish it. I appreciate it very, very much. And, after it's 29 years since Oslo was signed with Arafat, and there's no peace. We're further from peace than ever, more terrorism than ever. When are we going to learn that has nothing to do with a Palestinian state solution? I don't say two-state solution, because Israel's already a state. This is a misnomer. It's not a two-state solution. It's a Palestinian state solution that the left promotes. And since they've been offered a state 8 times in 80 years, 4 times in the last 20, and there's no peace now, 29 years later, we've given them 40% of Judea and Samaria, all of Gaza. They run their own lives in those areas, and there's still no peace. When will we learn that the issue has nothing to do with land or a Palestinian state? It has to do with Israel's existence. And that's why nothing works, because the goal is destroying Israel and the Jewish people, not a Palestinian statehood, which they could have had so many times.
Absolutely. So we pray for peace. We pray that everybody comes to realize the truth, and the truth drives peace across the region, around the world. And certainly our thoughts are with our brothers and sisters in Israel and those families who are sitting Shiva and lost their loved ones. And we're thinking about the people of Turkey, as I saw that you tweeted thoughts with them, and our hearts with them, that they shouldn't suffer from this. And we thank you, Mort. God should give you strength. Continue to fight the good fight for the Jewish people.
Thank you. And thank you for promoting Torah and Yiddishkeit, which is the most important thing any Jew can do. That's why we're here, to pray to Hashem, to live by his commandments and live by his principles and live by Torah as best we can. And so the holy work you do is greatly appreciated. Get more people to become serious Jews. There's nothing more important than that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mort. All the best. Nothing more important, holy Jews, getting Jews, proud Jews, and knowledgeable Jews, and self-respecting Jews. You heard it from Mort, most important thing. And we mentioned at the end of that, and certainly we should have said at the beginning, of course, we're thinking 12,000 people have died in Turkey. Earthquakes.
It's insane. It's insane.
Crazy number. Crazy number.
I'm sure Israel's right there. I'm sure they were probably the first to respond.
Yeah, Israel had, I think, 2 or 3 tremors, minor quakes today. Like something's going on over there. I mentioned the Parsha class, Parshas Yisro, like Yisro taught us, Vayishma Yisro, like listen to what's happening in the world and don't just turn the newspaper page. Don't just eat another spoon from your cereal. Like,
Right.
what does it
It's real.
mean? What does it mean for me? What is the message? What is the something to think about? Mort Klein, takeaways, Rabbi Broide.
I'm saying he's just someone that took his passion and he ran with it. And he wasn't involved in Jewish communal work, and he totally changed his career, his professional path, and it's commendable. I think imagine if there's so many people that are working in the call it in the secular world who could be giving so much of their talent towards the Jewish world and helping.
Yeah.
You know?
Anybody could do it. I mean, that was his
Yeah.
message too. You could get someone to change the textbook and make the travel guide more accurate, and you just have to care enough to get involved and say your piece and stand up for our people. And anybody could do it.
All right. Even if you can't rewrite it, just point out that it's wrong. Find someone that can rewrite it.
Stand up, call out,
Stand up,
do those
right.
kinds of things.
Right.
That is for sure. That is for
turn
sure.
the page. We don't pay enough attention.
So someone forwarded me Rabbi Rakefet, my great teacher at Gris Kolol, the great Rabbi Rakefet,
Sure.
gave a talk, and he referenced Rabbi Meiselman being on Behind the Bima and his disagreement with Rabbi Meiselman about the legacy of Rav Soloveitchik. So it was a great
should get him on. Let's talk about
great
it.
segment. I said to myself, you know what, Rabbi Rakefet, what a story he's got. His own life story and his teaching, and he's a lot of fun, a lot of energy, a lot of character.
How have we not had him? It's a
I don't know how that's happened. So we've got a lineup already coming up, exciting guests that are coming up, but we've got to add Rabbi Rakefet to that list. He definitely would be great. Closing thoughts, Rabbi Broide. What are you working on? What's going on in life? Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, no, it's just plugging along every day, another day, one day at a time. Hashem loves us. That's what I'm learning right now. Hashem loves us more than you know it, and let's just don't do what we ordinarily do, which is just hurt that relationship. Hashem
does love us. Ki atah imadi. Wherever we go, whatever we're walking through, Hashem is by our side. It's the only way we can get through it.
That's right.
We're sending lots of love, lots of blessings, lots of strength to all the people that we love.
Yep.
And a lot of people need a lot of love. They need a lot of strength right now. So we're sending it, and we're feeling it, and we love you, and we're with you. And please God, we should all only be able to share good things with each other.
Amazing.
Until next time. Don't forget, February 12th, next week, Ben Shapiro, Yair Rosenberg.
Oh, big night.
Discussion, a dialogue on anti-Semitism. Watch it online or come in person. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay holy.